couple of quick introductions there, and I'd just like to frame the conversation we're going to have today in the context of the goals that we have here in Fairfax County, and some of the considerations that I want you to keep in mind as you consider bringing projects forward for this funding. Number one, and I think most of you are aware, is that the Board of Supervisors has set a minimum goal over the next 15 years of 5,000 net new housing units affordable to people earning 60% of median income and below. In addition, our board has reaffirmed its policy that there should be no net loss of market affordable housing in Fairfax County. So we have a very significant commitment to affordable housing preservation. Finally, I would like to underline and note very particularly our commitment to equity in Fairfax County. The Board of Supervisors, and I'm very proud to say the Fairfax County Redevelopment and Housing Authority, adopted the One Fairfax Racial and Social Equity resolution, and it is a policy to which we very carefully adhere. And I would urge you, as you prepare your applications for funding, that you take a look at the One Fairfax policy and consider take into consideration equity issues as you move forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ryan Sheriff, who's going to walk us through what I think is a fairly brief presentation, and then we'll get to questions and answers. I would just ask, unless there is just a minor clarifying question, if you could hold your questions and comments to the end. Thanks again very much. Welcome. And Ryan, you're on.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us here today for the rollout of our FY22 NOFA. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this for reference purposes. So just wanted to make that note before we dig in here. I'm going to lead off here and just give you an overview of the NOFA, walk through the application process, and talk about some of the criteria related to the NOFA and the request for proposals related to it. And then I will turn it over to my colleague Jyotsna to discuss some highlights, both some updates and some highlighted points that have not changed in the NOFA, but just some things that we want to emphasize as we go through this process here. So if we can go to the next slide. So first, all of you have seen the good news. We are extremely happy to be offering a significant amount of funds through the NOFA this year. We have a number of resources as usual. We have the three sources of funds that we had in last year's NOFA, all at somewhat higher amounts, thankfully, to be offered through the process this year. So first, we have just under $10 million in our county housing blueprint funds, just under $9 million through the Tyson's Housing Trust Fund. A new addition this year, the county was able to preliminarily allocate a $15 million through the Federal American Rescue Plan Act, the federal ARPA funds here. So extremely happy to be providing those funds as part of the process, and we'll talk a little bit more about those funds as we move through here. And of course, with our state partners at Virginia Housing, they are again offering the Virginia Housing Amazon Impact Reach funds. And just to be clear, the TBD stated there does not mean that the funds, the amount of funds are still to be determined, but actually, as Jill will talk about a little later in our process, the allocation is a little bit different this year. There will be approximately $45 million available. There just won't be specific allocations set aside for the particular jurisdiction. So we'll hear a little bit more about that later on. If we can move to the next slide. So just giving you an overview of the application process. Again, this NOFA is focused on multifamily projects, 5 or more units, and this will all applications, including the separate application for the Amazon Reach funds, will come through the Fairfax County Department of Housing and Community Development and be processed by our team here. We've included a link which is also available on the website to note all of the Fcrha funding guidelines that give you an overview of the regulations and guidelines under which the financing available through this NOFA is made under. As we did last year, the applications will be accepted on a rolling basis through June 30th of next year, 2022, or if all funds are committed prior to that point, it will be up until that point. We would like to note that very importantly, for any projects that are vying for the 9% LIHTC, the applications to be submitted in March of 2022, we need to get those specific applications for those types of projects provided to us no later than 4 p.m. on October 1st of this year. The reason being that we will need to make sure that we can both work with our selection advisory committee and make the recommendations to both the Fcrha and our board of supervisors and get approvals to provide the awards in a timely fashion so that all of those successful applicants who are applying for 9% credits can have that award in hand in plenty of time to put together their application for 9% credits in 2022. And moving on to the next slide. So once you submit your application, we will be making all efforts to confirm within 24 hours of the receipt of the application submitted. As I mentioned, we will be there will be a selection advisory committee composed of HCD staff that will be reviewing and assessing and running these applications through the threshold criteria. The SAC is going to make a recommendation, like I mentioned, to the Fcrha and the County Board of Supervisors based on their assessment, and we'll get final approval from the Fcrha and the board of which projects can ultimately receive awards to be funded for the FY22 segment. Oh, sorry, just hold on one second there. And then as we'll go into a little more detail later, we will also have applications for the Virginia Housing Amazon Impact Reach funds. We'll note that a little bit later here. Those awards will be submitted to us and we'll clarify the deadline for those. Those will be evaluated by our staff and then all eligible applications will be submitted on and forwarded by us to Virginia Housing for ultimate evaluation and and selection for award by Virginia Housing. So a few more details on that later on. Next slide. The income targeting for the various funds, all of the funds coming through the county, including the ARPA funds, they will be following the they'll be required to be at a 60% AMI level or lower. We will consider income averaging as is allowed through the state of Virginia with a range of income levels going as high as 80% AMI, but averaging overall 60% on the property. We will consider those as an exception to the 60% AMI limitation. Obviously, just as with the LIHTC applications, the project should follow Virginia Housing total development cost per unit guidelines, the percentage of funds in relation to funds being used in relation to the total development cost should be reasonable. For these projects, there'll be a strong preference to use Fcrha bonds for 4% deals. And we'd note that any bonds that are, any projects related to using county-owned funds, whether that is provided through the PPEA program, or as you'll see, there's a new feature for these for the county to consider the purchase of land as part of these projects, those will require the use of FCRA bonds. REACH funds may be used with either 9% or 4% LIHTC projects this year, but any of the projects receiving REACH funds must use permanent financing from Virginia Housing. Next slide, please. As you will see from our threshold criteria that you can access on the website, we will be evaluating along with the SAC, the funding request, looking at a number of factors, including the per unit costs for these projects, making sure they're reasonable, and focusing in on the population served, in addition, including the affordability levels of the respective projects. There's a desire to maximize the efficiency of all levels of funding for the housing awarded through this notice of funding availability, and specifically in terms of the leveraging of county funds. We'll be looking for a heavy preference for those projects that leverage non-county resources at a ratio of 4:1. Next slide, please. So at this point, I believe I will turn it over to Jyotsna for our to talk about some updates and some highlights.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm just going to take a minute. I think I have some issues with the presentation itself. So if you can just give us a second here to
Jyotsna, I'm going to just work with our IT staff. I think they might have had the wrong version of this. If you just give me one moment, I will get that over to them. We can just start up in 30 seconds here. Hold on.
okay.
Ryan, this is George. Do you need to send that to me directly and I'll open it for you, or? Okay.
I think
Ryan, you may send it to my email directly and I can open it, please.
Okay, should be in there, George. Thank you.
Absolutely. 1 second, please.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, George. If you could move to slide 7, please, that would be great. Thank you. So moving on to the highlights for this fiscal year FY 2022, I think a notable addition is to our 3 funding pools is the $15 million in the Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds, which we will discuss a little bit in the following slides. Another important thing that we have carried on from the last year as well is that we will continue to accept the applications on a rolling basis with the exception of the REACH funds, which we have another slide that will talk through that. And projects that are permitted, we will continue to permit this year also the concept of income averaging that we did last year with going up to the LIHTC rules of up to 80% as long as the overall AMI levels are at 60%. Another important thing is Fcrha may consider dispersing these funds on a case-by-case basis at the 50% completion, 50% of the funds at 50% completion of the project. So we had last 3 of these points last year as well, and we wanted to highlight that we will continue using those this year as well. If you could move to the next slide, please. And the criteria, the minimal threshold criteria for the applications that must be met continues to be the same. We would like to get your signed and completed applications, as well as an evidence that the magistrate district supervisor has been informed. Zoning approval, as we have defined in our NOFA document, as an evidence of site control. There are a list of mandatory requirements in the application that were also published back in July, so they continue to be required for the application to be deemed complete. And then if any person or firm is suspended, we will continue, they will not be eligible to receive funds. So there are really no changes to what we had in the last year as well. The Board of Supervisors has preliminarily identified 15 million in funds. We are in the process of developing more guidance on, we think that there may be some geographic areas that would be considered in this allocation, but we are continuing to get that guidance. And as soon as the details are available, we will update the website. At this point, I may ask Tom if he has any Tom Fleetwood, if he has any other information that he would like to add to this.
I would only add that, we definitely are working on the geographic areas, and we expect, really, again, we'll push out more details on that soon. But just to be clear, I would not, take into consideration anything having to do with the placement of your project relative to these funds. So, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Other highlights, we will, this is not a change from last year. We do require a soil map confirmation on all new projects that are on the Fairfax County jurisdiction, that they meet these requirements, as well as we may require on a need-by-need basis the physical needs assessment to verify the proposed scope of the rehab work. We have done that in prior projects, and it depends from project to project. And this was usually done at the expense of the borrower. I wanted to highlight that part here. The next aspect, the Fcrha purchase of land, is new for this year. We may propose an option, an applicant may propose that Fcrha may acquire the land as a part of the project's overall structure as well as the financing structure, and that will be wholly and solely dependent on the feasibility of the land purchase as well as the scale of the project and affordability requirements. Of course, we'll take into view the public benefit that the project is offering. So if all those conditions are met, we may consider on a need basis the purchase of the land. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Affordability restrictions continue from the last years. They need to be recorded in our covenants for this loan that is proposed out of the SNOFA this year and may be recorded ahead of other senior to other financing in the projects based on the affordability restrictions. We highly encourage and give preference to projects that include cash equity from the owner or the firm, and this includes usually the deferred developer fee or any third-party grants that may be needed we do consider we give high weightage to the equity contribution. Next slide, please. In this blueprint category, as well as the Tyson's Housing Trust Fund category, we will give preference to the projects that are differing at least 50% of the fees. And this is going to be a loan. Both Blueprint as well as Tyson's Trust Fund will be given out as a loan, and it is not a grant. And also, we want to make sure the project itself has sufficient collateral to make sure that on a restricted rent basis, and we do go through an appraisal that we order from on these projects to ensure that the collateral value is covered usually. Next slide, please. This is an important one, not a change from last year. The debt coverage for must pay debt should be 1.15. This is covered in our funding guidelines as well that are posted. So that's an industry standard as well, but we look into the DSCR of 1.15, and loan to value ratio for all loans should not exceed 100%. Could you please move to the next slide? And this brings me to the Amazon Reach funds that are administered by our partner, Virginia Housing. We do have Jill Norcross, and for this slide, I am going to turn this over to her. Jill. You're on mute, Jill.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you a little bit about Amazon Reach funds. I do think probably many of you on the call are familiar with these Reach funds, but just as a little background, Virginia Housing supported the Commonwealth's effort to bring Amazon's second headquarters to Northern Virginia by committing $75 million, $15 million per year over 5 years to provide some additional funding for affordable housing in the region. This $75 million commitment is in addition to the other resources that we provide to our partners and projects. Our goal is really to deploy these resources as soon as possible. So because of that, we have decided to deploy the years 3 through 5 all this year with funding applications made by the locality, so made through Fairfax County by September 30th, 2021. So if you were familiar with years 1 and then year 2, we allocated certain amounts of money to specific jurisdictions and this year we're doing it a little bit differently. So the individual awards are limited to $3.75 million for proposals up to 299 units and $5 million for 300 units or more. This year, there's no specific allocation per jurisdiction, and there's no limit on the number of awards per jurisdiction. So that really means that we're going to be evaluating all the project proposals against each other, and the best projects are going to receive that funding. So the REACH funding is going to be awarded as a loan or grant, subject to our approval and discretion. Virginia Housing's reserved the right to have a panel of both internal and external stakeholders and experts to help us with the evaluation of the projects. So that's also a little different than we've done it in the past 2 years. And you can find more details about the program on the Fcrha website. I also put my name and contact information in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to get a copy of these guidelines. I'm happy to send it to you or answer any more specific questions. But we look also in the memo that you'll see on the website, or I'd be happy to send, you'll see the proposal evaluation criteria that really hasn't changed much, and the eligibility restrictions. We're really trying to encourage proposals of projects that are using the 4% low-income housing tax credit in lieu of the 9%, just due to the limited supply of 9% and the competitive nature of the program. So any award of Amazon funding, REACH funding, does not guarantee an allocation of the tax credits. You also still have to apply separately for either the 4 or 9 or both. And just as I believe Ryan had mentioned, the development must use permanent financing from Virginia Housing. And in addition to rental housing, homeownership proposals are also eligible for this funding, and they have to serve individuals and households at or below the applicable Virginia Housing income and sales price limits for this region. And that's something I can also share with you. So just want to really thank our partners at Fairfax County for the opportunity to share this with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. Next slide, please. I think this ends our presentation here, and we are happy to take any questions and answers at this point.
Hey, Jyotsna, just 1 second on the tail end of what Jill had mentioned. And thanks again, Jill, for joining us and talking about the Amazon Impact Reach program. George, if you could just go to slide 3 quickly, and this will be, again, we'll add this to our, we will add a version of this to the website just now that we have the right version up here. In addition to the deadline we mentioned for our NOFA application. Sorry, we just got a slide 3 there. There you go. That October 1st deadline for any projects applying for our NOFA through for 9% credits. So in relation to the Amazon Reach funds, Jill noted the eligibility criteria and all those. We will be posting those up on the website shortly. That also includes the application questions for the Reach funds. And because we have to have those in and evaluate those prior to submitting to Virginia Housing, we are setting a deadline for those applications for 4 p.m. on September 10th. So I just wanted to highlight that since we were just talking about the other aspects of the Reach funds and just distinguish that deadline from the other deadline. With that said, I think we are happy to open it up to questions. So feel free to put anything in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that. We do have some staff monitoring the chat, or if you would like to speak up and ask your question verbally, please feel free to do so.
Hey, Ryan. As we get started, before we start with the Q&A, I do want to note, just so everyone is aware, that included in the carryover package is also an additional $5 million in local funds, which we expect to also have available through this notice of funding availability. So the total amount that is going to be available and awarded through this is actually over $38 million. So I know everyone will object to that, but I did think I better note that. So I think we're ready for Q&A when if folks want to start raising their hands. Mr. Edmondson is not only raising, but waving his hand.
I know you're terribly surprised that I would have a question, Tom. Am I understanding that the loans, the Housing Production Trust Fund loans that you're expecting to make are to be must-pay debt service? You said a minimum 1.0 debt coverage ratio, which in my humble experience, makes your funding virtually unusable in tax credit deals. Is that really what you're intending?
I'm sorry. I'll speak to that. No, Jim. So just to clarify, I think you might be referring to what was laid out in the funding guidelines, and then what we noted in our presentation here was there's a requirement for must-pay debt service on the deal, which does not include the blueprint funding. Those are cash flow loans paid, generally through available cash flow in the waterfall. And so we were noting in the presentation, we just specified that, any must-pay debt should have a minimum of 115. And as you said, yeah, that any lender or program that was allowing to go down to 1.0 we'd be in a little bit of trouble in terms of risk there. In the guidelines, we're talking about sort of when you're including all debt, so the must pay and then the principal and interest on your cash flow loans, that our general standards are that all loans should be within a break-even 1.0 payment scheme.
Okay, I think I understand and appreciate that. Thank you. That clarifies.
Ryan, in the chat, we have a request for the PowerPoint to get inserted into the chat. So I think we can either figure that out or we can make it available on our website. We'll do one of the two here, and we'll let you know how we're going to handle that before we break today. Also in the chat, Mitch is asking, do we request funding from a specified source among the ones you listed, or just request generally, and we'll allocate as we see fit? It's the latter. Just request what you need, and we'll sort out, you know, what pieces to put where.
And I think the only
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the only exception being if you are vying for the REACH funds, you know, please send in the application that we'll be posting separately. That can be submitted separately to us by September 10th. And that does not preclude anybody from later submitting a NOVA application, which would, you know, apply as we would work out between those three other sources.
For the first question, we will send the PowerPoint, we will upload to our website after this presentation.
We got a question in the chat for what the max award size is for blueprint loans.
So we do not have a technical maximum. You know, I think that it would be related to the you know, both the amount of funding, the amount of eligible applications we receive. We would sort of determine then you know, what, you know, based on the merits of the project in our review, in the SEC's review of the applications, you know, the reasonable amount per project, you know, taking into account, you know, equitable considerations among all worthy projects that are submitted in, but we do not technically have a maximum.
Okay. Any other questions anyone has? I think Jyotsna and Ryan did a great job of being very clear. So not many questions.
Well, we apologize about the inconvenience about the presentation, though. Thank you for your patience.
Jim is raising his hand and has a question.
I think the explanations were excellent. Thank you. I'm like many other people on this call, we're anxiously awaiting the RFP for the parking area near the government center, and I'm wondering how you see in the next calendar year anyway, fitting financing that might be proposed related to that site within this program.
I can take that one, Ryan, if you want me to. So to be clear, what Mr. Edmondson is asking about is the property at approximately 4.5 acres, as I recall, no, 2.5 acres, at the government center parking lot, which the board transferred to the housing authority for redevelopment as affordable housing. We expect that the RFP will be issued before the end of this month. So we expect that the solicitation will be out again this month. So keep an eye out for that. Jim, in answer to your specific question about our local funding and its interplay with that particular opportunity. I would suspect that the local funding and financing associated with that project will be a next year issue because of the obvious, land use and other regulatory processes that you'd have to go through. So I would just ask everyone on this call to keep an eye out for that solicitation. We will communicate far and wide when it's available. There will be a separate pre-proposal conference for it. And I would just say, as Jim said, there's a lot of interest in it, and we'll communicate a lot about it. So we'll keep you posted on that. I see in the chat, Mr. Engel has asked whether that solicitation will also include the site that the board transferred to the FCRHA at the Franconia Police Station site. It will not. We do expect and hope to issue that solicitation this fall. So we're a little bit further upstream on that one. But again, like the government center site, we'll be communicating pretty robustly about what we're doing with that. So, any other questions? Mr. Welsh has asked about the Lee District site. The Lee District office site, John, is the same thing as the Franconia site. Okay. I do not see any other hands raised right now. I think we're going to probably wrap up now. Ryan and Joseph are going to talk to you about how to submit questions going forward. But beyond that, I just on behalf of the agency, I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you for your for the work that you're doing in our community, and please bring us some good projects. We're very much looking forward to working with you. Mitch is spoke too soon. Mitch is asking some questions about the appraisal requirements. Ryan, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I would say, Mitch, that they've become a bit more specific, just to sort of if a developer is working with their own preferred vendor, it just provides clearer guidance for the exact requirements that we're looking for, because in addition to us reviewing and having the information we need, we have to also clear those appraisals with the Department of Tax Administration. So in combination with them, we sort of set out the clear guidelines we're looking for in terms of an appraisal.
Just to add to what Tom said, if you have any further questions after this, please feel free to reach us at rha@fairfaxcounty.gov, or there is a phone number as well provided, which will be uploaded, 703-246-5170. These will be available online on our website. Same spot where you access the NOFA, I should add that.
And again, just to close this out, thank you very much for attending. We're looking forward to working with you. Fairfax County is open for business here, and we're wanting to do some good deals, and looking forward to working with you. And I just want to thank also the outstanding work of our staff to prepare the solicitation and the work that they'll be doing with you. So again, thank you all, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.